All right, guys, this will be fun. Let me ask you a question, and it's going to be a hard one. Here's the question. What's a bigger fight? Jon Jones versus Stipe or Jon Jones versus Francis? Now, the reason I say it's a tough one is all a big fight is, it has a good story. Okay, if you have a really good story that people really like to hear, that translates into a big fight. And if you don't, it doesn't. It's that simple. But these stories are vastly different in how they would be told. And Jon is taking his time. I can't blame Jon for that. How does Jon begin to promote a fight of which he doesn't have an opponent for yet, and he doesn't have a date for yet? And by the way, he hasn't even fully agreed with the organization that he's going to do it. I mean, you see where Jon's in a little bit of a tough spot. Okay, hold that thought, because we're not going to turn for Jon for the answers. We'll figure it out. We'll let the dumb know, but the point is still the same. That's two totally different fights. If you're telling me Jon versus Stipe, okay, now you're talking about the greatest light heavyweight ever versus the greatest heavyweight ever. I mean, just to start with, you are going to have some promotional crossover from the world of boxing where this has been done before. Evander Holyfield rings a bell, but Evander Holyfield, many of you don't know, he was not a heavyweight until he was a heavyweight. So him moving in that division was very compelling, and the boxers who make a habit of doing this, there's just something very special there that people are going to get. And that isn't going to take you from start to finish, okay? That can't be home plate all the way around the bases. Just the fact that it's the great versus the great, everybody's great. Yeah, I got it. But that would be something that's very real, and it's an angle that you could have. The X's and O's of Jon Jones versus Stipe is fascinating, because you could tie that back into the college wrestling days. You can tie that back to a common opponent in Daniel Cormier, who, by the way, Stipe shocked and took down in their second fight. I mean, you got to balance the wrestling with Jon. It's the first thing you have to do, because Jon will throw you down and beat the hell out of you, and then we all just go home. So you got to find a guy how that piece of the story can be worked around. Not to mention, Jon is going to have to find a way of explaining, not to you guys, I know you guys understand this, to the average fan, how a guy as small as him can take on someone as big as a heavyweight. Well, that starts to go away with Stipe. Stipe's been getting on the scale at 130 pounds, 131 pounds for his last two fights. Okay? Jon is claiming that he weighs 240 right now. So all of a sudden, that narrative that's generally a problem, it goes away. What if Jon's the bigger man? I mean, I'm just saying, but it goes, we don't know. We don't know how we're going to build this. And then you're going to have a very clear two fighters that are very well-rounded fighting. That's not what you have with Francis. If you tell me you think Francis is going to win, let's just start Francis Stipe. If you tell me you think Francis is going to beat Stipe, you're telling me you think Francis is going to knock Stipe out. And more specifically, you're telling me you think he's going to knock Stipe out with either a left or a right hand. Because this is where Francis does his knocking out, right? The same thing would be true if you told me you thought that Francis was going to beat Jon Jones. You're telling me that you think he's going to knock Jon Jones out, and he's either going to do it with a left or a right hand. So I bring that to you because it's a little bit more obvious at that point what direction we're going. It's a little bit more obvious in Francis versus Jon that we're going to take a great big brute of a man with incredible and rare power, who, by the way, is going to be the world champion, right? If Jon's standing across from Francis, Francis is going to be the world champion, which means Francis has extended an undefeated streak. By the way, along the way, took out the greatest heavyweight of all time, and now is reaping the rewards and the confidence that come along with that. They're very different fights. I mean, Dana White cannot take a boilerplate, here's how I'm going to promote a heavyweight fight, and then I'll just insert the players. No, he can't. They're very different. How he is going to build an emotion through the storytelling ability of Jon versus Stipe is very different story than the way Dana's going to tell Jon versus Francis. It's very, very different. And as you take a look at the heavyweights, to expand this stock, guys, I mean, we got Blades coming up with Lewis this weekend in a different time. Perhaps I should say in a normal time. That's a number one contenders fight. Curtis Blades versus Derek Lewis is a number one contenders fight. Derek's already fought for the title. Curtis Blades, who is criticized for beating Volkov. Can you believe the words I just said? Curtis Blades was criticized for beating Volkov. But now that criticism's looking a lot less and a whole lot better for Blades now that we saw how damn good Volkov is when Volkov beat Overeem, which, by the way, I was one of those people. Volkov always looked like a hard night out. But to understand how good Volkov is, we didn't really know till that fight with Reem, and now some of that shine goes back to Curtis Blades. I use that to argue my point that in a regular time, this is a number one contenders fight. There's a reason the big boys are on the main event of ESPN. It's to build them to go and fight for the strap. But the division's a little different right now because Jon is coming in and he's going to be shown that respect of the great run he had down a weight class to be given a number one contenders match. And when I do look at Blades and I look at the Black Beast, Derek Lewis, one of them is loved and one of them is hated. And I can answer half of that question for you. I know why people love Derek. If you just go to Derek's Instagram, which most of you do, you're then going to love Derek. It turns out he's a great big beast of a man who's got a fantastic sense of humor, who's very playful, who's a little self-deprecating at times, which is endearing, right? When the big scary guy in the room you can tease him and he can tease himself, there's something endearing. What I don't understand is why people don't love Blades. I don't understand that. He's young, he's handsome, he's successful. He never gets in trouble. He follows all of the rules. He seems to do everything right, and he's really good at the sport. Oh, and by the way, he's that kind of competitor that we dream of. He's that kind of competitor opposite to the 170-pounders right now who wants to compete, and the harder the better. He'll take on anybody, but the harder the fight, he'll just personally be happier. We love guys like that. Begs to fight Ngannou, doesn't go well, begs to fight Ngannou again. By the way, gets on a plane, goes to a different country, completely inconvenienced himself, gets beat a second time and begs for a third. We love guys like that. But for some reason, there's this stiff arm put to Blades. And you can't just take Blades at his word. Like when Blades, I remember the era. I watched it. When Blades would come out and tell people, yeah, I'm just going to wrestle. You don't like wrestlers, and feel free to boo, but that's all I'm going to do, and I'm going to win. I'm going to beat your guy and stick it up your ass. He was saying those things as a way of deflecting the criticism. But if you watched Blades, he was getting better in the gym. If you were to watch Blades 5 fights ago to 2 fights ago to 1 fight ago, you're seeing a guy with hands, with kicks, working some knees, and sure, he goes back to what he knows well as the wrestling, but that's what we want him to do. He got away from the wrestling completely because he read what somebody said about him in some headline. We're having a whole new conversation, and now I'm going to be pissed off at him. This is wise what he's doing, and his game is growing, and now he's in the 5-round. I mean, Blades, everywhere I turn around, is checking a new box, but I don't see his popularity going up. I don't think it's fair. And popularity doesn't work that way. Popularity does not care about fair. It's just the way it is. I just want to bring it to everyone's attention because I would like to see Blades get a second look by you guys. I'd like to see Blades be given a second opportunity here. He's now headlining his second show against a second top 10 guy in a row, begging to fight Ngannou a third time. That could be or not be for the belt. That's never what Blades has said. He wants Ngannou a third time. A guy like that is the kind of guy that we like. Consider that.